The Laughing Gallery. The Grand Conclave Hall was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It floated at the heart of Sovereignty Prime, a station so old that no one remembered who had designed it first. The hall could hold 10,000 delegates. Today, it held nearly 8,000, and every single one of them had come to watch Earth fail. Ambassador Elara Voss stood at the center podium and looked out at the gallery. She had been doing this for 14 years. 14 years of meetings, handshakes, translated smiles, and carefully chosen words. She had memorized the customs of over 200 species. She had learned to bow at exactly the right angle to a Keth warlord, to never show her teeth to a Valesi diplomat, and to always let an Olani finish speaking before she took a breath. She had done everything right. Today was supposed to be the day it all paid off. The question before the council was simple. Would Earth be promoted from provisional observer to seated member? It was a vote that happened once every 100 years for new species, and humanity had waited 60 years for this moment. 60 years of following every rule, signing every treaty, and smiling through every insult. Voss activated the display behind her and began to speak. She kept her voice calm and clear, the way she had practiced 100 times. She showed them the numbers. Earth's medical teams had developed cures for diseases that affected dozens of species across the galaxy. Human engineers had volunteered to repair and maintain 40% of the FTL relay beacons that kept trade routes running. Earth's peacekeeping soldiers had fought and died in 3 border conflicts that had nothing to do with humanity, simply because the Council asked them to. She finished her presentation and stood quietly, waiting. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Archon Selthari Vek raised his hand. Vek was the leader of the Kef Dominion, the most powerful military empire in the galaxy. He was tall, scaled, and cold-eyed, and he had never once looked at a human without something close to disgust on his face. He stood slowly from his elevated seat and smiled the way a predator smiles when it has already caught its prey. "If the Council permits," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "I would like to offer some additional context before we vote." Speaker Olani, the ancient insectoid who led the council sessions, clicked her mandibles once and nodded. "The floor recognizes the Archon." Vek touched a device on his wrist, and the display behind Voss changed without her permission. Suddenly, the hall was filled with images of Earth. But not the Earth that Voss had shown them. These were images of war, nuclear explosions, burning cities, mass graves, pollution choking rivers and oceans, soldiers firing weapons at other soldiers who looked exactly like them. "This," Vek said, "is what humanity does to itself." He let the images play. He let the silence in the gallery do the rest. "They have been a spacefaring species for barely 2 centuries, Vek continued. "In that time, they have shown a remarkable talent for destruction. They nearly ended their own civilization before they even left their birth world. And now they ask us to give them a seat at this table?" He paused and looked directly at Voss. "I mean no disrespect to the ambassador. She is, by all accounts, a fine representative of her kind. But her kind is simply not ready." The laughter started in the upper galleries. It was quiet at first, just a ripple. Then it spread. Delegates from species that had been in the galaxy for thousands of years leaned toward each other and whispered and chuckled. A group of tall bird-like creatures from the Arali Federation made a high-pitched sound that their translators did not bother to convert, but everyone knew what it meant. Voss stood still. She did not react. She had trained herself not to react. Speaker Olani called for the vote. The numbers appeared on the display almost instantly. 687 against, 12 in favor. Earth's membership was denied. Olani spoke in her dry, clicking voice. The Council thanks Earth for its continued contributions and encourages the human delegation to pursue further growth and maturity. The matter is closed. More laughter. Open, careless, certain. Voss looked around the gallery one more time. She saw Councillor Dren Mora of the Valesi sitting in the mid-tier section. Mora was one of the 12 who had voted yes. He looked at Voss with something like pity in his large, dark eyes. He gave her a small nod, as if to say he was sorry. Voss did not nod back. She turned off her display, picked up her documents, and walked toward the exit. The gallery was still buzzing with amusement. Some delegates had already moved on to other business. Earth's rejection was, for most of them, a small and entertaining moment in a very long day. But as Voss reached the door, she stopped. She turned around and looked back at the gallery. 8,000 faces looked back at her, most of them still smiling. "The Council has made its position clear," Voss said. Her voice was not loud, but the hall was designed to carry sound, and every word reached every ear and translator in the room. "So will Earth." She walked out. No one laughed at that, not because they understood what she meant, but because something in the way she said it made the air feel slightly colder. Back on her shuttle, Voss sat alone in the dark. She pulled up her communication device and opened a secure channel to Earth. Secretary General Idris Kine answered immediately. He had been watching the entire session live. "I saw," he said. "All of it?" Voss asked. "Every second," Kine replied. Voss closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were dry and steady. "What do we do now, sir?" There was a long pause on the other end. Kine was a man who chose his words carefully. He had grown up in a refugee camp. He had seen what happened when the powerful decided that the weak were not worth respecting. He had spent his entire life making sure it would never happen to his people again. "Come home, Ilara," he said quietly. "It's time we had a conversation about every promise we ever made to them." The channel closed. The shuttle turned toward Earth. Behind her, Sovereignty Prime grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light in the dark. Voss did not look back. The weight of every signature. The United Earth Security Council met in a building that had no windows. It sat beneath the streets of Geneva, 4 levels underground, behind doors that could survive a direct nuclear strike. The room was plain and cold, with a long table and 12 chairs, and nothing on the walls except a single flag that carried the image of a blue planet. Secretary General Idris Kane stood at the head of the table and watched the footage play. Every person in the room watched with him. The laughter of the gallery, the images of Earth's worst moments displayed like a joke, Archon Vex's smile, Speaker Olani's dismissal, and Ambassador Voss standing alone at the podium while 8,000 aliens decided she was not worth taking seriously. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long time. Kane placed both hands flat on the table. "How many treaties bind us to the Galactic Council?" he asked. The answer came from Director of Legal Affairs, Priya Shankar, who had spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for this moment. 1,447 active treaties, conventions, accords, and supplementary agreements. And how many of those were written to benefit Earth? Shankar hesitated, then answered honestly. "None, sir. Not one." She activated a display and began to walk the room through what the legal team had found. It was worse than anyone had imagined. The weapons treaties limited Earth's military technology to level 3, basic shields, simple kinetic weapons. Meanwhile, every seated member had no such limits. The Kef Dominion operated at level 6. Earth was forbidden from developing anything that could challenge them. The trade agreement set tariffs for human goods at 6 times the rate of any seeded species. For 60 years, Earth had been paying more for less and calling it the cost of membership. The colonization accords restricted humanity to a narrow band of star systems, most of them barren, resource-poor, and far from major trade routes. The best systems had been claimed by older species centuries ago, and the treaties made sure Earth could never touch them. But the worst part was buried deep in the sovereignty accords, in a clause that no human diplomat had fully understood when it was first signed. Article 77, Section 14. It stated that any provisional observers' colony worlds could be seized and redistributed by a simple majority vote of seated members at any time, for any reason. Every human colony, every station, every outpost that humanity had built in 60 years of backbreaking work in the worst corners of the galaxy could be taken away with a show of hands. Admiral Reina Cortez broke the silence. They put a leash on us and we thanked them for it. Kane nodded slowly. We did, because we believed that following the rules would earn us respect. He looked around the table. It did not. He sat down and folded his hands. I see two paths forward. The first is that we continue as we have. We follow the treaties. We wait another century. We present ourselves again and hope that the next generation of council members will be kinder than this one. He paused. The second path is Article 0. Everyone in the room knew what Article 0 was. It was written into Earth's own founding charter, not the Council's. It was a single line that said the United Earth Government reserved the right to withdraw from all extraterrestrial obligations if it determined that those obligations threatened human sovereignty. It had never been used. Most people thought it was symbolic, a leftover from the early days of first contact, when humanity was still afraid of the dark between the stars. Kane looked at each person around the table. I am asking for a vote. Do we stay or do we leave? The vote took less than a minute. 12 hands rose. 12 out of 12. It was unanimous. Kane stood. Then we leave. Tonight. The next 6 hours moved fast. In a secure facility on the far side of the moon, Dr. Amir Hadid received a call he had been waiting for his entire career. Prometheus is green, the voice on the other end said. Hadid closed his eyes, took a breath, and began unlocking systems that had been built in secret for over 40 years. In a deep space shipyard hidden inside a rogue planet that drifted between star systems, Fleet Commander Osei Ajay watched rows of lights come alive along the hulls of ships that no one in the galaxy knew existed. Not a large fleet by galactic standards, but these were not ordinary ships. And in Geneva, a team of diplomats loaded 1,447 withdrawal notices into automated courier drones. Each notice was identical. It was polite, formal, and absolutely final. It thanked the relevant parties for their cooperation, stated that Earth no longer considered itself bound by the terms of the agreement, and wished them well. At midnight Geneva time, the drones launched. They flew in every direction, to every embassy, station, outpost, and council office in the galaxy. By morning, every species that had ever signed a treaty with Earth would know that the deal was off. All of them, every single one. Admiral Cortez stood beside Kane and watched the drones disappear into the sky. There is no going back after this, she said. No, Kane agreed. They will be angry. Yes, some of them will want to punish us. Kane turned to her. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. They held something old and heavy, the look of a man who had learned long ago that dignity was not given. It was taken. Let them try, he said. Cortez almost smiled. Almost. The fleet will be ready. I know it will. Somewhere in the dark, 1,000 drones carried 1,000 messages, and every message said the same thing. Earth was done playing by rules it had never been allowed to write. Earth was done sitting outside the door and hoping to be invited in. Earth was done being patient. And by the time the galaxy woke up and read those messages, it would already be too late to do anything about it. Ambassador Voss, still aboard her shuttle halfway home, received a copy of the withdrawal notice on her personal screen. She read it once, then she read it again. Then she set down the screen and stared out at the stars for a long time. She was not smiling, but something in her chest that had been wound tight for 14 years finally began to loosen. It felt like breathing for the first time. The first reaction across the galaxy was laughter. Again. When the withdrawal notices arrived, most species treated it as a joke. The Keth Dominion state news networks ran segments mocking what they called the little apes throwing a tantrum. Talk shows invited military analysts who explained, between chuckles, that Earth's fleet was a collection of outdated patrol ships that could be swept aside in an afternoon. Social feeds across dozens of worlds filled with jokes about humans and their emotions and their short, ridiculous lives. The laughter lasted about 72 hours. Then it stopped. The first sign of trouble came from the medical sector. For decades, Earth had been the quiet backbone of the galaxy's pharmaceutical supply. Human scientists had a strange gift for biology. Something about the way their minds worked, the way they thought in patterns and connections, made them unusually good at understanding how living things broke down and how to fix them. Human-developed medicines treated diseases across more than 200 species. Entire hospital systems on alien worlds ran on drugs that were designed in human laboratories and manufactured on human colony worlds. When Earth pulled out of the treaties, the medicine stopped. Not slowly, not with warnings. It just stopped. Ships carrying pharmaceutical cargo turned around mid-flight. Factories on human colonies shut their doors. Orders were canceled. Contracts were voided. Within 1 week, hospitals on 36 worlds began reporting shortages. Within 2 weeks, the shortages became emergencies. Species that had relied on human-made medicine for generations suddenly discovered that no one else made it. No one else even knew how. Panic set in quietly at first, then loudly. The second blow came from the stars themselves. Humanity had been maintaining and upgrading 40% of the galaxy's FTL relay beacons. These were the devices that made faster-than-light travel possible across long distances. They were scattered across thousands of systems, often in dangerous or remote locations, where no other species wanted to send their people. Humans had taken the job because no one else would, and they had done it well. Now Earth pulled its technicians home. Every single one. Within days, the first relay beacons began to drift out of alignment. Trade routes that had been stable for centuries started to flicker and fail. Ships that relied on those routes were forced to take longer paths or stop traveling altogether. The galactic economy, which had been built on the assumption that these routes would always work, began to shake at its foundations. On the floor of the Galactic Council, delegates who had laughed at Earth a week ago were now shouting at each other, trying to figure out who was going to fix the beacons. The answer was no one. No one had the training, the equipment, or the willingness to do the work that humans had been doing for free. But the worst surprise was still coming. Intelligence Director Yuki Tanaka had spent 30 years building something that no one in the galaxy suspected: a network. Human operatives, embedded in governments, military commands, corporations, and research institutions across every major species. They were translators, assistants, engineers, and advisors. Quiet, polite, hard-working humans who had been welcomed into alien institutions because they were useful, and because no one thought they were smart enough to be dangerous. They were very smart, and they had been watching everything. Earth did not release all of the intelligence it had gathered. That would have been reckless. Instead, Tanaka released just enough. A carefully chosen selection of classified documents, private communications, and secret deals that proved what many smaller species had always suspected. The Council was not a democracy. It was a club. The powerful species made the rules, and everyone else followed. The leaks hit the galactic networks like a bomb. Corruption scandals erupted in 3 major governments. Secret military agreements between the Keth Dominion and two other empires were exposed, revealing plans to carve up neutral territory that did not belong to any of them. Financial records showed that the Council's trade regulations were designed to funnel wealth toward the top 5 species and away from everyone else. The galaxy was not just embarrassed, it was furious. But the fury was not directed at Earth. It was directed at the species that had been running things. And then came Project Prometheus. The treaties had limited Earth's military technology to level 3. Basic energy shields, conventional kinetic weapons, patrol ships designed for border duty, not real combat. Every seated member of the Council knew this, and it was the main reason no one feared humanity. On paper, Earth's fleet was a joke. But for 40 years, in a shipyard hidden inside a rogue planet drifting through empty space, Dr. Amir Hadid and his team had been building something that was not on any paper. Fleet Commander Osea J. brought the Prometheus fleet into the open on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 40 ships emerged from the dark and took up position along the border of human space. They were not large by galactic standards. Each one was roughly a quarter the size of a Keth dreadnought. But when the galaxy's long-range sensors got a clear reading on those ships, the data made no sense. The energy signatures were off the scale. The drive systems were unknown. The weapons profiles matched nothing in any database. Military analysts across the galaxy ran the numbers again and again, hoping for an error. There was no error. Earth had not been sitting at level 3. Earth had been building at level 7 and beyond, in secret, for decades. The Prometheus ships carried miniaturized singularity drives, adaptive shield systems that could reconfigure in real time, and weapons that operated on principles that most galactic scientists had only theorized about. 40 ships. That was all. But 40 ships that could each go toe-to-toe with a full Keth battle group. Archon Selthari Vek received the intelligence report in his private chambers. He read it 3 times. Then he called his senior admirals to prepare for war. But before the call was finished, 3 of those admirals found their private communications published on every news network in the galaxy, courtesy of Director Tanaka's operatives. The communications revealed bribery, illegal weapon sales, and a plot to assassinate a political rival. The Keth military command collapsed into chaos overnight. Counselor Dren Mora of the Valesi, watching all of this unfold from his small office on Sovereignty Prime, opened a private channel to Ambassador Voss. His hands were shaking. "Elara," he said, "what are you doing?" Voss looked at him through the screen. She was calm. She was always calm. "What we should have done 60 years ago, Dren," she said, standing up. Mora stared at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for years. "Good," he whispered. "Good." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called on a cold morning by station time. Though there was no real weather on Sovereignty Prime. There was only the recycled air, and the hum of old machines, and the growing feeling among every delegate in the Grand Conclave Hall that the universe had shifted beneath their feet while they were busy laughing. The gallery was full again. 8,000 delegates, just like before. But the mood was different now. No one was smiling. No one was whispering jokes. The hall was thick with tension, and when Speaker Olani took her place at the central podium, even her ancient, expressionless face seemed heavier than usual. "This session has been called to address the actions of the human government," Olani said, her clicking voice carrying across the silent hall. "Earth's withdrawal from all treaty obligations is a violation of galactic order. It threatens stability. It threatens peace. The Council demands an immediate return to compliance." She paused and looked toward the section of the gallery where Earth's delegation normally sat. The seats were empty. Earth had not sent anyone. There were murmurs, angry ones, frightened ones. No species had ever simply refused to appear before the Council. It was unthinkable. The Council was the center of galactic civilization. Ignoring it was the same as saying it did not matter. And that was exactly what Earth was saying. Olani pressed forward. She proposed a resolution she called Unified Corrective Action. In plain language, it meant a combined military strike by Council forces against human space. It was the most extreme measure the Council had ever considered, and she presented it as though she had no choice. Before the vote could begin, every screen in the gallery changed. Earth's signal cut through the Council's communication systems like a blade through paper. The face of Secretary General Idris Kane appeared on every display, broadcast to the entire station and to every relay in the galaxy that still functioned. Kane sat behind a simple desk. There were no flags behind him, no symbols of power, just a man in a quiet room, speaking clearly. My name is Idris Kane. I am the Secretary General of the United Earth Government. I am speaking to the Galactic Council and to every species that can hear my voice. He paused. His eyes were steady. 60 years ago, humanity reached out to the stars and found that it was not alone. We were young. We were eager. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. And so we signed your treaties. All 1,447 of them. We signed them in good faith, believing that if we followed the rules, we would be treated as equals. He leaned forward slightly. We were not. He listed them. Not all of them. That would have taken days. But he listed enough. The weapons limits that kept Earth defenseless while other species built war fleets. The trade tariffs that drained human economies. The colonization zones that gave humanity the worst systems in the galaxy. And Article 77, Section 14, the clause that allowed the Council to take everything humanity had built with nothing more than a vote. We did not complain, Kane said. We kept our word. We sent our doctors to heal your sick. We sent our engineers to fix your relay beacons. We sent our soldiers to die in your wars. And when we asked after 60 years of service for a seat at your table, you laughed at us. He let that sit. We are not declaring war. Let me be absolutely clear about that. We have not fired a single weapon. We have not harmed a single being. We have simply stopped doing things that we were never given credit for doing in the first place. If your medicines are running out, it is because we made them. If your trade routes are failing, it is because we maintained them. If your secrets are being exposed, it is because your secrets deserved to be exposed. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. We came to you in good faith. We gave you our medicine, our labor, our patience, and our respect. You answered with contempt. We are not your enemies, but we are no longer pretending we need you. The screen went dark. The gallery sat in stunned silence. Then the shouting started. Delegates screamed at each other, at the empty human seats, at Speaker Olani. Some demanded war, others demanded negotiation. The smaller species, the ones who had been quietly suffering under the same system, said nothing. They just watched. 3 days later, Archon Selthari Vek made his move. 300 Keth warships, the largest fleet assembled in a generation, jumped to the edge of human space. They took up position along a border marker called Korat's Line, a stretch of empty space between the last Keth outpost and the first human colony. It was a show of force, a message, a threat. Fleet Commander Osei Ajay was waiting for them. He had 40 ships, 40 Prometheus-class vessels, arranged in a calm, even formation. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They simply sat there, dark and silent, like stones in a river. The Keth fleet outnumbered them nearly 8-1. By every traditional measure, the humans should have been terrified. They were not. For 14 hours, the two fleets faced each other across the void. No shots were fired. No words were exchanged. But the Keth sensors told a story that no amount of bravery could argue with. Each Prometheus ship had the firepower of a full dreadnought. The shield readings were beyond anything Keth technology could match. And the drive signatures suggested that those small, quiet ships could move faster than anything the Keth had ever built. 40 ships against 300. And the math did not favor the 300. Ajay sat in his command chair and drank a cup of coffee. He had brewed it himself that morning, from beans grown on a human colony world. He sipped it slowly, watching the Keth fleet on his screen, and waited. At the 15-hour mark, the Keth fleet turned around. They jumped away without a word. Archon Vec told his people it was a strategic redeployment to protect core territories. The Keth state media repeated the story with confident voices and serious faces. No one in the galaxy believed it. The standoff at Korath's Line became the most talked-about event in a generation. Not because of what happened, but because of what did not happen. Earth had not attacked. Earth had simply stood its ground, and the greatest military power in the galaxy had blinked. Within days, messages began arriving at Earth's diplomatic channels. Not from the Council, not from the great empires, from the small species, the overlooked ones, the ones who had been taxed and mocked and pushed to the margins just like Earth. The Valesi, the Orali, the Drenith, species that had never dared to speak up before. They did not ask for protection. They did not ask for weapons. They asked a simpler question. Can we talk? Ambassador Voss, back on Earth now, read through the messages one by one. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Species she had met during her years at the Council. Faces she recognized, voices she remembered. They had been afraid before. They were still afraid. But something had changed. And now, they wanted to know if there was room to stand beside them. Voss forwarded every message to Secretary General Keene with a single note attached. It's working. 6 months passed. The galaxy did not end. But the galaxy that had existed before Earth walked away from the Council was gone. And something new was growing in its place. The old trade routes never fully recovered. Without human technicians maintaining the relay beacons, several major corridors had gone dark permanently. New routes were being mapped, but they ran through different systems now. Systems that had once been considered unimportant, but had suddenly become valuable, because human engineers had set up their own beacons there. Ships that wanted to travel fast and safely found themselves passing through human space, and human space was open to everyone who came with honest intentions. The medical crisis had hit hardest in the first 2 months. Worlds that had depended entirely on human pharmaceuticals scrambled to develop their own. But biology was not something you could rush. Kane had authorized emergency medical shipments to planets facing genuine epidemics, delivered freely, with no conditions attached. But the routine supply, the steady flow of medicine that the galaxy had taken for granted, was now available only through new agreements, fair agreements, equal agreements. One by one, species came to the table. The Valesi were first. Counselor Dren Mora arrived on Earth with a small delegation and sat across from Ambassador Voss in a sunlit room in Geneva. He looked older than she remembered, tired, but his eyes were bright. "We should have stood with you years ago," he said. "You are standing with us now," Voss replied. "That is what matters." They signed a bilateral treaty in 3 hours. Equal trade terms, shared technology access, mutual defense commitments, no hidden clauses, no fine print designed to chain one side to the other. Just 2 species agreeing to be honest with each other. Then, the Orali. Then a dozen more. Then 2 dozen. Within 6 months, Earth had signed independent treaties with over 90 species. The agreements were all different in their details, but identical in their foundation. Fair terms, mutual respect, no hierarchy. The press started calling it the Terran Accord, though it had no official name. It was not an empire. It was not a council. It was just a growing circle of species that had decided they were tired of being told where to sit and how much to pay for the privilege. And it was growing fast. The Galactic Council watched all of this with increasing alarm. Every species that signed with Earth was a species that moved further from the Council's influence. The great empires that had run the galaxy for centuries found their power shrinking, not because anyone was attacking them, but because no one needed them anymore. The breaking point came when the Council's own economists published a report that they probably should have kept secret. It showed that within 2 years, the Terran Accord's combined economic output would surpass the Council's. Within 5 years, it would double it. The numbers were not speculation. They were math. And math did not care about pride. Speaker Olani made a decision that no speaker had made in over 1,000 years. She left Sovereignty Prime and traveled to Earth. Her shuttle landed in Geneva on a gray morning. She walked through streets filled with humans going about their ordinary lives, carrying bags, talking to each other, holding the hands of their children. She had never been to Earth before. No speaker ever had. It was smaller than she expected, louder, messier, full of strange smells and strange sounds, and a chaotic energy that made her old bones ache. She was taken to the same building where the Security Council met, the one with no windows, 4 levels underground. But Kane did not receive her there. He received her in a garden on the surface, under an open sky, with birds singing in the trees, and the sound of a city alive all around them. It was, she realized, a deliberate choice. He was showing her that Earth had nothing to hide. Kane greeted her with courtesy and offered her a seat. Voss stood behind him, along with Admiral Cortez and a small team of advisors. On Olani's side, there was only herself and a single translator, though Olani's command of human language was better than she let on. Secretary General, Olani began, the Council recognizes that mistakes have been made. We are prepared to offer Earth a senior-seated position with full voting rights, removal of all restrictive clauses, and a formal apology entered into the galactic record. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary offer. A year ago, it would have been unthinkable. Voss felt something tighten in her chest. 14 years she had fought for exactly this. Kane listened to the offer with his hands folded in his lap. He nodded slowly when Olani finished, the way a person nods when they understand something completely. Then he said, "No. Speaker Olani," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I want you to understand that this is not about anger. We do not hate the Council. We do not wish it harm. But we did not do this to get a better seat at your table." He leaned forward. "We did this because your table was built to keep species like us on the floor. Every rule was written by the powerful. And every species that did not have power was expected to be grateful for whatever scraps were offered. We played that game for 60 years, and the only thing it taught us was that the game was rigged." He sat back. "We are building a new table, Speaker. It is open to everyone. You are welcome to sit at it. The Keth are welcome. Every species in the galaxy is welcome. But you will follow the same rules as everyone else. No more hierarchies. No more provisional members. No more hidden clauses. Just equals, working together, because that is the only system that deserves to survive." Olani sat very still for a long time. The birds sang. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the city, a child laughed. "You are asking us to give up our authority," she said. "I am asking you to share it," Kane replied. Olani looked at him. She had lived for over 600 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched civilizations burn themselves to ash, and others build themselves from nothing. She knew, with the certainty of long experience, that power never lasted. Only fairness did. She stood. "I will bring your terms to the Council," she said. "That is all we ask," Kane said. She left. Her shuttle lifted off and climbed through Earth's atmosphere, through the clouds, through the thin blue line where sky became space. She did not look back either. 3 weeks later, the first council species applied to join the Terran Accord. Within a month, 17 more followed. Ambassador Ilara Voss stood on the observation deck of Sovereignty Prime one last time. The station was quieter now. Half the delegations had left. The Grand Conclave Hall, which had once held 8,000 voices, echoed with emptiness. But it was not a sad emptiness. It was the emptiness of a building that had served its purpose and was waiting to become something new. A young Valesi diplomat, Dren Mora's protégé, walked up beside her and looked out at the stars. "Ambassador," she said softly, "did you always know it would come to this?" Voss watched a line of human ships moving freely through space lanes that had once been forbidden to them. She thought about the laughter in the gallery. She thought about Kane's quiet voice on the shuttle channel. She thought about every treaty, every insult, every hand extended in good faith and slapped away. "We hoped it would not have to," she said, "but we made sure we were ready if it did." The young diplomat nodded and stood beside her in silence, watching the old borders of the galaxy dissolve like lines drawn in water. Somewhere out there, in every direction, new ones were being drawn. Not by the powerful, but by everyone together, one honest agreement at a time. The stars had not changed, but the people moving between them had, and that made all the difference.